Alright, I was just shopping at Target, and right now there's a lot of fighting over collectible cards. It started with Pokemon, but spread to sports cards. And I had an interesting conversation with some guy, a few years my junior, I want to say, who was talking about which cards are going to be valuable and why, and he also wants to invest in something that is not going to go down with our currency, right? He looks at cards as an alternative currency. I want to mention one problem with that idea, though. First of all, cards are a fiat currency, right? They can be printed anytime there is demand for additional cards, right? They could print additional other cards that will compete with the cards that are already on hand, right? The other problem is that the cards are not divisible. Let me give you an example of the concept of divisibility. So I'm an adjunct professor, but I also do a lot of private tutoring. So let's say I put aside 5 hours later tonight to do tutoring. Now, is my time completely divisible? I would argue no. I mean, it's a little bit more divisible than a Pokemon card. Let me explain why. So, 2 years ago, I made a resolution to normalize my relationship with food, and I regularly fast 16 hours a day these days. In the past, when I would schedule tutoring, I would like to have a half an hour, 1 hour break to eat. Nowadays, now that I'm fasting when I'm working, I hate having gaps in the day. I want to get my work done as quickly as I can, and then I can move on to something else, right? The other issue is that sometimes, let's say I've been fasting since 8 p.m. tonight, last night, and I want to get to my meal at 3, 4 o'clock, right? I want my tutoring to end by 3 or 4, right? Having a gap from 12 to 11 really doesn't help me anymore, right? Now, the other problem is that sometimes I have a client, and it's one isolated client in the late afternoon or something, right? 4 to 5. I hate those schedules. I mean, if that's the only time slot will work, that's it. But I really despise those schedules. Don't get me wrong. I don't hate the students. I hate the schedule. The problem is that, I have a favorite of stargazing vantage point in Ellensburg. I mostly live in Redmond right now. And I sometimes have to pull into somewhere in North Bend in order to catch Wi-Fi to work on the student. I gotta pray that the Starbucks that I go into doesn't have blasting music, right? Or I have to make sure I have a fully charged computer. I can sit in my car and do it. Sometimes I've done that as well. But it puts a significant weight on the rest of the scheduling for the day, right? And sometimes I have a student at 4 o'clock. By 2:30, I want to go out to my favorite restaurant, right? Maybe that's the time of the day that I'm eating at that moment in time. And it's 2:30, it's 2:40. Already, it feels like the clock is ticking already, right? Because I got to make sure I can go home and set up my computer in time. Or if I'm on the road, right, I have a favorite restaurant in North Bend as well. Make sure that I can find a suitable place with Wi-Fi, right? If I had 3 or 4 students and I just found that one place to crash with Wi-Fi, that's a whole lot less challenging per student, right? And so dividing causes my time to lose value, right? It's kind of like cutting a diamond, right? Dividing time kind of feels like that, right? There are certainly other things in my life that divide a whole lot easier, right? So, for example, sometimes I like to be happily single, but at the same time, I sometimes also date somebody, right? Now, imagine in a typical week, I have 3 nights when I could date, right? Either solo-sexually or heterosexually. I can kind of divide those between those two without losing too much value, right? So dividing my dating life is kind of like cutting a bar of gold, right? Of dividing my tutoring scheduling is like cutting a diamond, right? So I thought I would give some insight on how Pokemon cards work.